Hey, I want to tell you about the time that I went to the hospital, and it was about a little more than 2 weeks ago on a Monday. I had a nice weekend trip with my friend to Pennsylvania for the first time, Harrisburg, and we came home late Saturday, and Sunday I just kind of laid around the house, and Monday I got up around 6:30 and went and peed and went back to bed for a couple of hours, and at 9 or so I got up and ate some broccoli and cheese. And then I felt like I had to use the toilet, like kind of runny or something. So I sat down and I didn't know what was coming out of there. It didn't feel right. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be terrible. So I brought the toilet paper up and it was full of blood, and the toilet was full of blood. Yikes. And I started freaking out. And so I thought maybe it's just like a really bloody hemorrhoid for some reason. And after an hour, it just kept bleeding, and it just had to keep going like every few minutes. And I was like, oh, this is really terrible. I have to call 911. So I'm running around the house, like throwing stuff in the bag and the keys and the shoes, and I just freaking out. And I'm calling people and telling them I have to go to the hospital. So they're like, okay. So I get to the hospital, and I took an ambulance, and I asked to go to my hospital, and they would not take me to my hospital. They took me to the one that was closer by here. And so I ended up waiting there in the waiting room for a long time. And my partner came, and my friend came, and you can see there's some cops there with some crazy girl all hunched over, and there's crazy people back in the back. And it was just a miserable place, and I just had to keep going to the bathroom like every couple of minutes. And I was just bleeding, and I was like, please. And I grabbed some nurse, and I was like, please, can somebody please see me? And it wasn't until I got there at around 11:30, and they didn't even see me till around 3 o'clock, I don't think. And when they did, they were like, here, give us a stool sample. So this is the stool sample. It's nothing but blood. So they looked a little alarmed enough to send me down for a CT scan to see what was going on. And by around 7 o'clock, they said they were going to check me in for the night. So I went up to the room around 7:30, and I sat there for a day, bleeding, and had all these IVs stuck in my arm. And they were putting these drips in, which were making me crazy. I mean, they were terrible. I felt terrible on them. Like, it was cipro, and it was flagyl, and pantoprazole, and also they were putting a dextrose, 5% dextrose saline drip in. And I kept asking them not to do that because I'm diabetic and I have to take insulin. Then they wanted to argue with me about the insulin, whether they could control it or I could control it. And I was like, no, I'm going to control it. So they took my insulin away for a whole day. One of the big problems I had. They kept sending me food that was like all carbs, and then they told me I was going to go in for a colonoscopy. And so I had to do prep for a day with Go Lightly, and if you've ever done that, it's a whole sodium stuff that cleans you out like a faucet. Well, by the end of that clean out, it had stopped bleeding, but it was bleeding up until then. I mean, bleeding, disgusting. And they went to go look, and they said they found diverticuli, and they thought it was diverticuli was the problem, but they couldn't find where it was bleeding. So then the next day, Thursday, they said, well, maybe we can run this test where we run some radioactive dye through your veins, and wherever it's bleeding, we'll be able to see it. Well, they didn't do the test. So I sat there another day, Friday, and the same people came back and said the same thing. And they didn't do it again. And so Saturday came, and another set of people came and said they were surgeons, and there was like, I don't know, I must have seen 50 doctors and all these different nurses. There's different people every day, and they just did not seem to be communicating very well, and I was just not happy. So I'm sitting there with these IVs in my arms, and this medicine is making me crazy. And I finally figured out the menu, so I got that part down right. But these IVs, they hurt, they burned, and I was just like, please, I'm not going to take this cipro anymore. I'm just not going to take it. And so they had to stop giving it to me, and then they decided to give me the pills, and I was much better on the pills than the stupid IVs because they were burning and they hurt. And you can see this one here. This is a problem for me now. Long story short, they didn't find out what the problem was, and so I left, and I came home, and I got to, well, I just ran out of there. I was so happy to leave. And I got to see my cat, and I still had the stuff on my arm, but I did stop bleeding. However, I'm left with a problem with my veins. They were taking blood out of me like all day, all night to do CBC, complete blood counts, to check my hemoglobin, and it kept going down and down and down to from 14.5 to 8.2, I think was the lowest, and then it came up to the 9s, and it dropped back down to the 8s, and up to the 9s, and down to the 8s, and that's where I left, around 8.9. But these IVs were just horrible, and they also took venous blood draws, and I had them all over, and now I'm having a problem, and the problem is, I think it's called superficial thrombophlebitis, and apparently this is it's like a clot in the vein, or inflammation. So it's painful. It's very uncomfortable. It's running all the way up my arm from the back of my hand. You see all these veins? These are very hard. You can see my other hand. And I've got lots of veins there. These are soft, but these veins are all hard. And this one is called the cephalic vein. It's running up my arm. You see that? That right there is a big lump. And it's coming all the way up here to this inner elbow area. And I think the clot must be like right before that split there in the vein. And the good news is I have more than one way for the blood to get back to my heart. The bad news is this one's really clogged up, and it is painful. You can see this thing on the back of my hand. That thing is hard as a rock. And these just go. I've got a diagram from my anatomy books. This is the cephalic vein, and this is the one that's bothering me the most. And it's exactly like this. See it here? Goes up here into this part, and then it goes up here. So this whole thing is hard and inflamed, and I'm not too happy about it. What I am happy about is my friends came, and they dropped me off these little guys here to watch over me, and some flowers, and I just couldn't be happier that I have such great people in my life. But now I have to go to the doctor today to find out what's wrong with my vein and if they can fix it. I hope they can, because I did not enjoy my stay at the hospital, and I think they really messed me up, and those drugs were horrible, and I'm happy I got some understanding and a backbone to say, no, I'm not going to take these stupid drugs because I don't have to. And I'm glad I stopped it before they did more damage because it was really messing me up. These IV lines are not always healthy. They hurt to keep those needles in, and they leak, and then they have to change them. And after a few days, they start searching around for veins because they've already poked full of holes everywhere else. And I'm just glad that's over. Now I have to figure out what's next. Thanks. I'll let you know.